Welcome to the second part of the EXCiPACT for Users video series. We will review the EXCiPACT certification program in detail. Excipient risks are extremely variable. Manufacturing of excipients is also very variable. And the associated hazards and threats to patient safety that come from that can be highly variable as well. All this poses multiple challenges, as all auditors of excipient suppliers well know. In addition, excipients are not usually manufactured specifically for the use of medicinal products, and they range in spectrum from suppliers dedicated to serving pharma to those with commodity products, with a small percentage of medicinal use. It is easy to see that excipient risks range accordingly if we consider the following factors. Plant design. Many excipients are made in large plants, primarily designed for manufacturing products for other industries using manufacturing standards that are dictated by those other industries and not necessarily focused on pharmaceuticals and GMP. EXCiPACT helps them align better with the pharmaceutical industry, acting as a bridge for these suppliers and their existing infrastructure and pharma's higher quality systems. Another kind of excipient risks arise from how regulatory compliance varies around the world. Excipients can go from high to no regulations, and suppliers don't need to be registered with the national health authorities in many countries. Quality standards, as we said, can be quite variable. What EXCiPACT actually aims to do is to harmonize and bring them together to a common global standard. Excipient suppliers serve many user markets, and they may not concentrate on the pharmaceutical industry. This creates a very complicated distribution for the excipients to reach the pharmaceutical manufacturer. The excipient supply chain can be very complex, including many other players involved in shipping and transporting excipients, like brokers, traders, warehouses, and associated relabelers, adding both threats and risks to an already very complicated mix. EXCiPACT developed its Good Distribution Practice standard to cover these excipient supply chain value-added services. All of these risks are very important and need to be evaluated. There's a great guide from the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme, PICS, which covers ascertaining GMP for pharmaceutical excipients that involves performing a risk assessment that evaluates all of these factors in order to determine which GMPs are required by your excipients and how to apply that to the particular supplier in question. EXCiPACT fits exactly into that program. If we look at the development of the standards, then it's quite important to note some key aspects into their generation. It's been a long history of nearly 20 years now, and it began in the year 2000 with ICH Q7, a game changer for GMP standards. Before that, there was only one definition of GMP for finished drug forms. With Q7 came the focus of how to apply GMP to chemical manufacturing. This was equally applicable to excipients that share many of the same technologies. At that time, the International Pharmaceutical Excipient Council had an existing GMP guide for excipients. And in 2000, a global team of pharmaceutical professionals took these standards, merged them together to generate what was then the first international GMP guide, the EXCiPACT PQG GMP Guide, and its sister document, the Good Distribution Practices Guide, that was generated at the same time based on international standards like ISO 9001 and WHO guidance. Since then, those documents have been constantly updated, and they were the basis for the EXCiPACT GMP and GDP standards. And having defined standards which are now objectively audited against in a consistent manner, allow the development of the EXCiPACT certification program. In 2017, the GTDP guide for WHO was updated, and the ISO 9001 itself was updated in 2015. This meant that the EXCiPACT GMP and GDP standards had to be updated to reflect those revisions. As you can see, EXCiPACT keeps evolving as the external environment and best practices are redefined. The other core aspect of EXCiPACT is the development of the audit program and how auditors should be conducting themselves and the competency of auditors. And again, in the beginning, the development of EXCiPACT considered the industry standard ISO 19011 as the guide for audits. You may be familiar with it as it's widely consulted throughout our industry. EXCiPACT also used a less well-known ISO standard, ISO 17021, which governs how certifying bodies, which are the organizations who perform the audits and issue certifications, should be overseen and how their quality systems have to be set up in order to ensure that this certification and its audits are done to the highest possible standards. Those two ISO standards were merged into the EXCiPACT requirements for auditor competency and the certification program itself. In 2012, ISO 17021 was updated. It was merged with the ISO 19011, so EXCiPACT realigned in 2017 with the latest edition of the standard to ensure that our certification bodies can apply EXCiPACT as seamlessly as possible within their existing certification operations. Most recently, two ISO 17001 standards were issued. ISO 17021-1, the basis standard, and ISO 17021-3 that covers the auditor competency for quality systems. If you have questions, visit www.excipact.org.